Okay, this is Pro Wrestling Rant. It's your buddy Mike Messier, and I do appreciate that I have folks here that are watching some of my videos, or many of them, that are not pro wrestling fans. But I would probably advise that this one is really just for pro wrestling fans. Uh, and there's a lot of things going on right now in the pro wrestling world, but I'm going to talk about two topics. Fresh from the oven, so to speak, was last night's Thursday night's Dark Side of the Ring Plane Ride from Hell episode. I believe this is season 3. And the Plane Ride from Hell is something we've heard about. There's been podcasts about it. People have done YouTube videos about it. But Dark Side of the Ring always manages to get a little more meat on the bone, or a little more meat off the bone. And this is a story that's almost 20 years old, but people are still talking about it. Obviously, there's no video footage as far as I know. Cell phone cameras were not really a thing. This incident, I believe, took place in 2001 or 2002. I guess 2002, just before the WWF became the WWE, like right at that cusp. And the wrestlers were coming back from I believe it was an insurrection pay-per-view event overseas, and they had this private plane, and the stewardess, one of the stewardesses on that plane, she got to speak her truth, or maybe speak the truth, however you want to put that. But her perspective, and interesting lady, and I saw, some people are speculating about her. I don't see any motivation for her to not tell the truth, as she recalls it. And let's be honest, she was probably, of all the people there, not intoxicated. Obviously, she was doing her job as a professional airline stewardess, and these wrestlers were drinking and kind of pointing the finger at each other. Some saying that Mr. Perfect, who's now deceased, so he can't speak for himself one way or the other, but dropping H bombs in their drinks. So some of the wrestlers who acted poorly, they have their excuse of blaming the H bomb, as they call it, the drugs on Kurt Hennig, who's no longer alive. So everyone's got someone to point a finger at. I thought Jim Ross on the documentary. Here's one thing I want to say about documentary filmmaking. A lot of people are giving Tommy Dreamer a lot of heat right now on Twitter. They didn't like the way that Tommy Dreamer was defending Ric Flair, or kind of blowing off the accusations from the stewardess. But when a documentary is made, as for the most part, and I think the Michael Jordan Last Dance thing is the exception to this, the people that are being interviewed usually don't have access to the other interview subjects' takes. So I could be wrong, but I don't think that Tommy Dreamer saw the stewardess being interviewed before he made his memories public, or Jim Ross, or anyone else, Mike Chioda, or anyone else that was interviewed. So just keep that in mind, because I think once you kind of realize that if that things that Tommy Dreamer said that were offensive or seemed callous, or rude or dismissive, those statements are being filmed without him probably having knowledge of the lady stewardess being interviewed. So it does make Tommy look like a jerk, quite honestly. I know Tommy Dreamer. I've met him. He's a nice guy to me, but I wasn't on this plane ride from hell. Obviously, I wasn't there, and I haven't hung out with Ric Flair to the extent that he has. So, but I think this is kind of one of these things with pro wrestling and pro wrestling fans, that for the most part, pro wrestling fans are good people, Middle Earth type people. I mean, I think you can say that the wrestling fan is, culturally very vast. You can have urban wrestling fans, you can have suburban wrestling fans, you can have country wrestling fans. All ethnicities are welcome to watch wrestling, just like any other subculture. But I think what happens is that the wrestling fan wants to think that the wrestlers subscribe to their same moral compass. And we've seen over and over again, the pro wrestlers do not subscribe to the same moral compass as the regular person. You know, we often, as the wrestling fans, question, well, how could, Vince McMahon do that? Or how could this company do that? Or how could that wrestler do that? They're not like normal human beings. That's the answer. I mean, they don't operate in a system or in a world of standard morality or standard regular person type of thinking. So that's the answer, is that these wrestlers do live in a cocoon. They live in a bubble. And probably, as the Dark Side of the Ring pointed out, this was really the end of one era. Jim Ross made this comment. It was the end of the WWF, and right before they went to WWE, and perhaps, but maybe not, there was, this was like the final end of that era, the excess of the 80s and 90s. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying the possibility. Some people on Twitter again are really getting, they're bringing up stuff like the Undertaker's quote from a few months ago when he was interviewed, and I think he was with Joe Rogan interview. He said that Undertaker said that he liked the business better when men were men. Using my line, by the way, I use that line all the time. But Undertaker, referencing the good old days of wrestling, so to speak, and not really into the wrestlers that play video games, and some people kind of wisely pointing out, well, isn't it better to play video games that get drunk and stoned and screwed up on an airplane and harass women? So this is it's a touchy subject. Obviously, Tommy Dreamer did point out that the lady stewardess did make a deal. She got the wrestlers always use wrestling terms for, instead of saying a settlement, instead of saying a legal settlement, Tommy says a payoff. So the wrestlers, they're so wrapped up into their own way of doing things in their reality, they even use the terminology, like you'll hear wrestlers outside of wrestling use the word gimmick for everything, or but in this term, he's using the term payoff. It's not really a payoff. It's a legal settlement. And but I pretty much believed I pretty much believed the lady. I'm pausing not for dramatic effect because someone's messaging me, and I've learned the hard way that if I don't put the do not disturb button on my phone, then these stream gets interrupted. But anyway, so I believe the woman. I think that she has really little motivation to make up a story. And if you've listened to podcasts before on the plane ride from hell, I could be wrong, but I think both Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard have done Something to Wrestle podcasts on this. I could be wrong, but at least one of those guys. Just listen to those podcasts. You don't have to ask me for all the answers, or watch this Dark Side of the Ring. There's been a lot of details on those podcasts about it. This story has been told before. What Dark Side of the Ring does, and they do it well, to give them credit, is they take some of these wrestling stories that have been told in other ways, usually through shoot interviews. Shoot interviews are wrestlers talking out of character, for those that don't know. And they present them in a more polished fashion to a larger audience, the Dark Side of the Ring. So good for them that they've done that. And they've also told some stories like the Gino Hernandez story that really haven't gotten as much attention as they probably should have. So I give them a lot of credit. But they do make mistakes too. And the Jake the Snake Roberts thing, where Jake the Snake was saying that the Ultimate Warrior was going to defend, supposed to defend the title against him, Jake the Snake, and put Jake over for the title. That was such a misrepresentation of the truth. I won't say a lie, but a misrepresentation of the truth, meaning that Jake's memory serves him incorrectly. And that's the other thing with these wrestlers you should know, if you don't already. A lot of times they merge memories. I've seen that happen with wrestlers all the time. They take memories from their past and they kind of blend them together because they're on the road so much and they're wrestling so many matches that they don't always remember everything. Good old Adam chat. I'm glad to see you, Adam. Apparently nobody listens to Shivani's podcast as he's talked about Flair running naked down the halls of many Marriott hotels and flashing staff. Having two girls in his hotel touch the baby's arm, big deal. Then the crying and laughing emoji. Well, here's the thing, Adam, and I get what you're saying, and it's also probably a bigger conversation. The bigger conversation is applying the morality, maybe the wokeness, if you want to say that, or the ethics of the morality of today to what was not moral or accurate 30 or 40 years ago, but just accepted or tolerated might be the word. And I would definitely say that things that happen in 2021 are not as tolerated as what would have happened in 1986, 1987, or in this case, 2002 with the plane ride from hell. Now, that being said, I could definitely tell you that Flair, from my opinion, and I'm not a friend of his, but I think Flair probably in 2002, in his mind, it was still 1986, if you see what I'm saying. Like Flair, at that point, wasn't the old Ric Flair. Like he wasn't the elder statesman Ric Flair with Wendy, his fourth or fifth bride. And he wasn't doing the forgiveness tour or the apology tour of I'm sorry I didn't spend more time with my kids. Ric Flair in 2002. I think they were either just starting with Evolution or about to, 6 months or a year later. But Flair was still thinking he was the Nature Boy. So I think it's interesting, and I think that celebrity. I mean, you see guys like I'm trying to think of the guy who had the women. Was it R. Kelly? Hi, Landon. This is a pretty intense wrestling conversation, Landon. So welcome to chime in, buddy. But it's pretty intense conversation about the pro wrestling Dark Side of the Ring we watched last night. So as far as this R. Kelly, obviously nothing he did was accepted. My point is that some of these guys, and mostly it's men, get away with this stuff because of their fame, their prestige, their money. They are tolerated, put up with. I mean, wasn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not the biggest connoisseur of pop culture. Was it R. Kelly that was married to? Was it Brandy? Not Brandy. It was Aaliyah. She was like 14 or 15 or something like that. And I don't think that, if you think about things like that, and that was only like 94 that, this young Aaliyah is married to, I believe, R. Kelly. If you put that out there today, 25 years later, it would be like, oh my God, put this guy in jail right away. For whatever reason, in 1994 or 95, people turned the other cheek, or they thought it was great. Hey, Eric, what's going on, buddy? Doing a little talk about this Ric Flair stuff, Tommy Dreamer, Dark Side of the Ring. Funny enough, Just Incredible actually comes out looking like the baby face on this thing. Just Incredible, for all the troubles that Justin's had, he comes out looking pretty sober, both literally and like sobering. Like Just Incredible actually came out looking pretty good. Tony Khan going to break his own precedent and bring in Flair. Meanwhile, Jimmy Havoc is stuck delivering packages for the UK's version of UPS. Yeah, Khan doesn't care. Well, okay, Adam, good points, man. I mean, it's my point about Just Incredible was that last night on the Dark Side of the Ring, Justin came out looking pretty good by comparison. I mean, am I wrong in saying that? I think I'm right, but Justin, compared to these other guys, looked pretty good. And of course, they put a lot of heat on the guy that's dead, Kurt Hennig. And not to say that Kurt didn't H-bomb these guys, but, obviously he's deceased. He can't defend himself or speak up for himself. Let's go back to this Tony Khan thing. Well, I haven't, as of now, we have not seen, we saw Ric Flair do that thing with Marco Stunt. Was Flair on an actual episode of Being the Elite? I'm not sure. And will Tony Khan have second thoughts about bringing Flair in? It's possible. I mean, they, being AEW, does mention Dark Side of the Ring stuff quite a bit. I mean, they basically used Aunt Linda, Pillman's, Pillman Jr.'s aunt, as fodder for MJF. So Dark Side of the Ring does have a history of they do pay attention. AEW pays attention, Dark Side of the Ring, obviously, and vice versa. So I could see that this might not have Flair come in. It's also a possible thing that kind of our new woke Ric Flair, or our new 2021, like I said, apology Ric Flair, I could see Rick issuing a public tweet or a public apology about this, or reaching out to the woman. I could see that happening. I could also see it not happening for legal reasons, if nothing else. Adam says, I thought Justin came off in a good light, but we all know he was a big time pillhead back then. Well, he's explained that himself, and he's admitted to such. A friend of mine at one point was producing a Justin Credible documentary titled Credible. I'm not sure of the status of that right now. And Eric chimes in. Yeah, it's common knowledge about Flair's past. One Twitter person put this out there, Eric, which I to build on your point, it is common knowledge. However, for the younger fans, it may not be common knowledge. So I think one Twitter person, I don't know who, but they basically made a good point that the younger wrestling fans who are maybe naive to how things were, not naive, but just ignorant, meaning they don't know of things in the 80s, the 90s, maybe the 70s, and obviously the 2000s, they didn't know. Those fans don't know. Well, Eric, I'm not sure what point you agree with on that, but you have to sometimes clarify which point you agree with, because things go so fast here, and there's always a delay between what I say something in the comments. Well, this was a tough watch. That's how do we put this? It's certainly an entertaining watch, this Dark Side of the Ring, but it's also sad. And I think maybe for these wrestlers and any sports athlete or any man or woman, when you watch an episode like this, and good point, funny, might make Flair's meet and greets kind of awkward. In a way, it's kind of similar, if I do say, make a real off-the-cuff comparison to the Hogan videotape from a few years ago, where we as the wrestling fans or the pop culture fans have built up either Hogan or Flair to this kind of Mount Rushmore, or God of wrestling status. I think the Hogan thing might have hurt more for people, because Hulk Hogan was kind of almost like a modern day Santa Claus. And I think when Hogan comes out and he's got this horrible racist rant on this bootleg sex tape, where he's, first of all, Hogan's with another guy's wife, his